Alright, so lately I've been drawing some bold, some loose, and some would say grungy sketches. But today I'll take you through the process of creating a minimal and bold sketch from this scene. You've probably seen this style before on Instagram or Pinterest, and if you've wanted to try it out for yourself but didn't know where to start, then this video is for you. If you're new here, I'm Karan, and I help rigid rookies turn into loose liners. So before we even get started, you have to choose the right pen. So right here I have a 1.5 size fine liner and a medium nibbed fountain pen. So here's what they look like. The 1.5 is pretty thick, and the medium nib is slightly thinner. This one's a little bit too thick for me, so I'll be using the fountain pen for this sketch. What's important here is that you have something thick as well as consistent. You don't want to be messing with line weight here. You don't want a thin line and a thick line. You just kind of want it all the same weight. So before the pen even touches the paper, we're going to have to establish the story of the sketch. Doing this now will just make the sketching process so much simpler and so much easier. When thinking about composition and telling the story, I like to use the SSC framework. So that is subject, support, and then context. This is a photo I took in California a couple years ago, and what drew me to it was this camper van here and also this big commanding tree that's taken up most of the frame. So in this particular photo, I think the subject will be the camper van. That's your subject. For support, you're looking for other things in the photograph that will support your subject. And in this one, it is the tree. So this will be your supporting character. And then to contextualize it, you want to show location. So for instance, this photo was taken on the street the camper van is parked. So maybe I'll add the street here, this tree here. I don't really care about this fence. Maybe some of the bushes here. And that's essentially it. So I have my subject, my support, and my context. Before I actually get into the sketch, I'll be showing you the 3 types of line we'll be using. The first is just a simple straight line going from point A to point B. Then we'll be hatching diagonally. So we'll be doing a 45-degree hatching, which are just lines close together. And then finally, we'll be using a thick line, which is just a line. It's just slightly thicker. We'll color it in. The first step to all of this is to sketch out your composition. I find with these minimal pieces that composition is key. You don't want to just put your pen down and start sketching because you'll make all sorts of mistakes. But unlike loose sketching where mistakes are actually very helpful, in these minimal sketches, mistakes will just get in the way and it'll make it seem like something's wrong. So for that, I'll use a pencil to sketch out my scene before I put the pen down. Now you might be wondering, isn't pencil cheating? Well, here's a little secret. All your favorite artists use a pencil. Even if it looks like they go pen first, they probably start with a pencil. So the first thing I like doing is to draw out a little frame so that way I know my sketch is contained. I just drew a square to contain my composition. I'll start off with the subject, which is a camper van. Then I'll move on to the support, which is the tree in the background. And then finally, the contextual elements from the street. The camper van is about 1/3 off of the bottom of the frame, and I'll center it horizontally. I'm using an HB pencil for this stage, which makes a very light mark. You don't want to make your lines sketchy. You want to make it as simple as possible. I say that knowing full well that my lines are sketchy. But simpler lines will make your life so much easier when you're ready to ink. I'll just go in and draw the details in the van. I'll draw the rims of the wheel. And then I'll just draw where the curtains are in the windows. So that's it for this part. This is the subject done. I'm going to move on to the support, which is the tree in the background. So I'm very loosely just sketching in the tree. And then lastly, I'm going to sketch in the context, which are the little elements around the street to show you that this is a camper van parked on the street. So I'm just going to draw this little tree here first, the one on the bottom left corner. Remember, these don't have to be naturalistic. And then some of the bushes on this side. I'm going to draw the sidewalk line here. And then come out the back. And then I'm just going to add some of the bushes on the side here to add a little context. And on this side, I'll add the bush to anchor this little area here. And then the last thing I'm going to do in this outline phase is to do the shadow underneath the van. Now I'm going to move on to the outline phase of the sketch. This is your opportunity to simplify it even more. Remember before when I said not to be sketchy with your lines, it'll make outlining harder? Well, this is your opportunity to kind of fix those mistakes. And that's exactly what I'll be doing. So we'll be trying to do as simple a line as possible with our pen or marker. And remember before when I said that all of the lines should be the same weight, we'll stick to that mostly. But then we'll also use slightly thicker lines to emphasize weight and shadow. So starting with the camper van, I'll try to be as steady as possible with my line. This is one of those instances where I'll use a thicker line. And this will also be a thicker line. I'll also fill in the black of the wheels. Front bumper and rear bumper. I want to also separate the highlight from the shadow from this container on top. Alright, so that is the subject done. The van is done. I'm going to move on to the supporting character, which remember is the tree. So I'm going to try to follow my guidelines as much as possible, but also I'm not too worried here. It's a tree, it's organic. It doesn't need to be too precise. What I will say though, you want to have these lines go in a curve to follow the tree. The tree done, now we'll move on to the supporting characters. So that's the front bush by the side of the road. I'll next do the sidewalk. And I'm also going to color this in as a thick line. Then I'll do the bushes in the midground. And then finally, the shadow of the camper van. So that is your outline phase done. The next thing we're going to do is to add the shadows, and in this section we'll be using diagonal hatching. So before you even start hatching, I want you to look at the image and try to decide where the sun is coming from, because that's going to decide our hatching direction. So in this photograph, the sun looks like it's coming from the top left and shining this way. So we'll be using a 45-degree angle starting from the left, going to the right. We'll start from the tree, which is the supporting character. Now you saw all of these lines that I drew here. I'm not going to start my lines directly from those. I'll actually give it a little bit of a gap and then start inwards. And the reason why I want to do that is because I want to show the highlights of the trees. The hatching will show the shadows, and then the white space will show the highlights. I'll also be following my line all the way through. So if I start from over here, my line will continue down until I get to another branch. All right, so let's start from this side. And then stop a little bit away from the camper van too. You want to keep the space between the lines as consistent as possible. And you can see this is starting to take shape now. This little gap shows the highlights of the tree, and then the diagonal hatching shows the shadows. If your hatching isn't consistent, it's not the end of the world, but it will look better the more consistent you are. As I approach the borders, I'll use the guide that I drew with the pencil, so I know where to begin and end my pen stroke. Alright, so that is the biggest part done. That is the most hatching you'll be doing today. So now for the supporting characters, we're going to hatch the same exact way. I'll start with the back and then move forward. These are a lot easier on the wrist. And then we'll go in for the shadows of the camper van. And it's the same thing, 45-degree angle hatching where the lines are consistently close to each other. Or as consistent as you can get. This does take a good amount of practice. And I almost forgot the storage on top of the camper van. When using so much ink, you have to be really careful. As you can see from over here, I kind of smudged the ink a little bit by just resting my arm on it, so be very careful of that. And then the absolute final thing I'm going to do is to add the location. This photograph was taken in Foster City, California, which is about a few miles outside of San Francisco. And that's it. Now you have everything you need to convert any scene into something minimal and striking, just like this one. But there was something I didn't show you, and that's how to make compositions perfect. To make compositions as easy as possible, they have to be as predictable as possible. You saw how I just knew exactly where to draw the camper van, where to draw the trees, where to draw the supporting characters. That's because I use thumbnails to make tiny little sketches of the scene, so I know exactly where this goes before my pen even touches the paper for the final piece. That way I don't make mistakes because all of my lines are predictable. I know where every element is going to be before I even sketch them. If you want to know how to use thumbnails to nail compositions every single time, check out this video here. But if you're a beginner and this was all a little bit too much, I have this playlist here that was made just for you that will teach you all of the basics.